Hi, welcome to the Roles We Play live on Dying of Exposure's Twitch. My name is Steve, and of course I'm joined by the illustrious and wonderful, gotta remember it's backwards, wonderful Ron, Ron was kind enough to have me join him on the Roles We Play, so we've been doing many episodes of that, and they go up on Roles We Play. It's Roles We Play, the rolesweplay.podbean.com, right, yep, for the website, and as a podcast, and then they also make it to Dying of Exposure. Usually we film it, but today we decided to do it as a live Twitch because we're going to discuss like new stuff, things that are currently happening. And so the way this is going to go is that Ron has a number of notes and he's going to kind of guide the conversation. But if you have things that you want to chime in or help guide the conversation, feel free to do so in the chat. Hi, Cammie. This is the first of 2 live streams that will be on Dying of Exposure tonight. Don't worry, Through the Mill, still happening at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. That's the homebrew 5th edition Western Fantasy role-playing game that we normally do. But we thought since it was the 15th, and these usually come out on the 1st and the 15th, barring terrible disaster beyond the existing terrible disasters we've had, here we are. So for people that don't know or that haven't like watched or listened to it, Ron, I'll let you do the spiel. What is the Roles We Play? What do we normally talk about?
So the Roles We Play is a podcast. The tagline is the roles we play and the games we love. We talk all about different games with a focus on role-playing games, but that can be video games, tabletop, live action, pretty much anything Steve and I enjoy playing and enjoy talking about. I have a lot of fun doing it. I come from a gaming podcast that focused super heavily on live action role-playing and a little bit of tabletop called Northwest Nerdcast from back in the day. So I really wanted to keep talking about gaming, but I wanted to throw in all my loves, which include board games and tabletop and all that fun stuff. And Steve was silly enough to agree to join me.
Well, we're both kept men at this point, so like, what else do we have to do? Cook dinner and do podcasts. That's what we can do. So this episode is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a bit longer. It's probably going to be an hour roughly or so. We'll probably be on until like somewhere between 6 and 6:30 and Pacific time. And we're just going to talk about the current state of gaming. Now that's gaming not just in the video game space, but LARPing, tabletop, board games if we have time to get to them. They're kind of on the back burner because of the quarantine anyway, but I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that as well. And let's jump right into it, as Philip DeFranco says. Let's jump right into it and talk. So what is our first subject heading?
We're gonna go easy, and this one will be pretty quick. We're gonna talk really quick about live action role playing right now.
All right.
The state of live action role playing in 2020 is it's not really happening.
What? But why? What's happening?
Getting together is a little bit dangerous and precarious considering COVID-19. Now there's a bunch of smoke everywhere. It's apocalyptic. So being in a thing where you have to sleep in a cabin with a bunch of people and social distancing is difficult. Games have been put on hold. One thing I did want to touch on really briefly is I super appreciate that so many games have gone out of their way to create digital experiences to keep people still in the game. So you have all these different online events. I know that like some of the Alliance chapters have been hosting these online tavern nights, so people can just go in, be their character, and still have that attachment to the world without risking health. I know there's a couple of games that have decided to hold events, but like, that's I don't agree with it, but it's people are going to do what they do.
Do you know any specific games that are doing the digital thing? Do you have that listed in your notes, or is that something that you could collect up?
It's something you can collect up. I mean, basically, check with your local game. It'll be really evident. They're going to post the crap out of it on your social media. Like I said, Alliance is definitely doing a bunch of digital experiences. I know there are some LARP runners out there that do more international stuff that specialize in digital experiences. And those are really booming right now. And that's been a really great way.
Sorry, I read Sam's comment. Alliance. Do you feel like, assuming that we get, a vaccine and can gather in 2021, do you feel like this represents a potential boom for LARPing? Because, you got to assume that, LARPers are pretty dedicated, but everyone's got busy lives, right? They're maybe they have to skip an event, maybe they can't do that. But now, I would imagine that many LARPers are super thirsty, right? They've got to be just bereft of LARPing in person. They've got to be just chomping at the bit to get back to it in a safe way. So do you think that probably say summertime, early fall 2021, are we going to see a bit more of a high, heavy response attendance in that? Is it going to rubber band back?
You ever been to a pool? At opening with a bunch of kids in the summer, the neighborhood pool. That experience where 50 children run screaming, diving into a pool? That's pretty much going to be how people interact. I see a lot of folks who are super jonesing, even the players who only play once or twice a year, man, if I didn't get some play in early last year, it's maybe been one and a half, 2 years since I played a game. And I know that's going to reinvigorate a lot of things. Something was asked in the chat there, how do you think COVID will impact the social issues within LARP? I think 2020 in general will more impact the social issues in LARP. I've seen a ton of performative gestures, which is a good start. And I think the proof is going to be in the pudding. When these games come back and we see whether or not people are taking things into consideration, maybe people are going to be more considerate about, hey, maybe if I got the sniffles, going to a game might be kind of a not great thing to do. And I think there's also a lot of social justice that's going on right now that I think is going to be really fantastic to see how that alters games. And there's been a lot of talk right now. And unfortunately with something like this, right now it can really only be talk because they're not playing. So I don't want to call it out yo, these guys aren't doing anything, because I guess it's going to be it's just gonna have to be a wait and see sort of thing.
Yeah, it really is. Right now, it's real easy to speak about what might happen or what might be implemented into policies without having to actually action upon them, right? And so I can definitely see that being a situation where there will be I imagine some organizations will really prove themselves and others will kind of be you said a lot, but then when there were actual problems, nothing was done, or actual concerns, nothing was done, kind of thing. I think every LARP should be issued with an immediate temperature register. This is completely unrelated and a tangent, but we recently went to get my partner and I glasses, spectacles, and I hadn't been back there since pre-COVID, and so we had to be let into the building or let into the retailer, and then we both had to have our names registered, immediately put hand sanitizer on. They took our temperatures. With glasses,
Wow.
They're things you put frames on, right? And so they're don't put them back on the thing, put them down on the counter. We will collect them and sanitize them. And everything. They wanted to just get replacement lenses for their current existing frames, and they're pre-COVID, that was a normal request. We don't do that anymore because of COVID. We can't take your frames and everything. We are sorry about that. And I'm just geez, there's so much work to do it. And they literally had to lock us in and out and had a limit of no more than 8 customers, I think, which they're a pretty spacious store, so that felt like a good limit. And then there were only 2 people working the front. And so there would have been 10 people in which would have easily allowed everybody to be nice and separated. And of course, mask on the entire time. They were in gloves. It was weird. It was like they were hermetically trying to seal the place. And I loved it so much. And so I feel like it's gonna be that where I feel like there will be some LARPs probably that are it will be just written in their policy. It's like, if you have signs of illness or have concerns about temperature or fever, you just can't participate. We apologize, but we can't risk the health of everyone. We've seen it with university and school openings that like it just instantly hits, right? One concert will hit them.
And that's always been an issue with LARPing, is that people don't want to miss the story. They only get to live as their character 5 to 6 weekends a year, and you don't want to miss one of the couple of days a year you get to live as that person. I've been there. I've done stupid things like LARPing sick. I'm not proud of it. I certainly it was a mid-20s decision that I would never make again. But yeah, man, I just hope that in the end, what comes of this is people are a little bit more cleaner, people are a little bit more safer, and we normalize things like masks, like other countries do. When you have the sniffles, put on a mask for other people's safety.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, LARPs, like I said, man, they're not running right now. So let's jump on over to something I'm pretty excited to talk about, which is diversity, equity, and big changes in the tabletop industry.
Yay!
Yeah, I am stoked to see how much POC voices are being lifted up right now, and other minority voices are being lifted up right now in the tabletop space. I think there has been a sentiment of enough is enough. Like, brown people, women, queer folk, all fucking game, and perhaps excluding them from the old white dudes club is detrimental to a hobby that we want to see boom so more interesting things can come out.
But as an old white dude, my gatekeeping feels so much more satisfying than just having a variety of people to play with. Like, how dare you all invade this space that I had nothing to do with creating, honestly. Like, I'm not a creator. I mean, I guess I am a creator now, but I wasn't for several years. And so, but I will angrily post about it online when I think that somebody's like, you know what? Gypsy's a racist. Gypsy's a racist term, and coding things like strange in all the stereotypes that Romani people have had to deal with over the years. Probably not good to have in your D&D book.
No, like maybe having a racial slur just straight up in your book might not be like the best thing unless you're doing some sort of educational thing with it. Yeah, and I think like one of the big ones I want to call out right out of the gate is you got to talk about the big guy. You got to talk about D&D. And I love the fact that Wizards has come out with their diversity statement, with a pledge to be much more diverse in their hiring practices, because that's been an issue at Wizards. This can sound dumb. I have a lot of friends who work for Wizards of the Coast, and most of them are white dudes. I'll be frank.
What?
Great people.
What?
Good friends, but frankly, it's not a super diverse culture, and they're really trying to make a difference behind the scenes, which I hope will reflect in the front, which other things they're doing and more that the consumer is going to see is they're doing something I've been doing for a long time, and I know a lot of you have been doing for a long time, and doing away with like inherently evil sentient races.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. We were just talking before we went live, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like, a gelatinous cube is going to do what a gelatinous cube does. It's not evil. It just needs to eat. It's going to crawl along. You don't even need those. A lot of people try to make the argument for like, oh, well, you got the just mindless monsters. Right. They're just doing what they do. That's how they survive. And I love that they're now taking those tropes that are, if you really start diving into them, the more uncomfortable it gets. Because, you start breaking down orcs. It's like, yeah, all orcs are evil. Okay, well, tell me about these orcs. Yeah, they're like a really savage tribal culture. Oh, that's uncomfortable. Yeah, most of them are dark-skinned. So what are some of the like more good races? Oh, let me tell you about these super hot pointed ear races, mostly white, mind you, mostly white, and they have bows and stuff. It's super cool. Tolkien would really get off on this.
Yeah. I have to speak from personal experience. So in my home campaign, which is Wednesday nights and not streamed, it's like one of the only things I do regularly now that isn't somehow content. The home game that we play, I have regions of a town that's been around. I have the idea that historically that stuff existed, right? Like orcs and goblins and stuff used to be bad. I kind of kiped a little bit from Bright there, but and they weren't like bad like by nature, they were utilized in a bad form when cultures were a bit more, not so much isolationist by choice, but just by region. And then good solid 1500 years ago, they broke their chains of oppression, because they weren't like choosing to live like that, and now the world is integrated. Like, that's all ancient history, but there are some leftovers, not so much in how people treat each other, but in how like cultures developed and everything. But no one race needs to be like particularly more or less civilized. And then hopefully one day one of my games will get to a thing, because it's floating there, it's waiting for any game. I want to use this story thing, so whenever a game gets to it is who gets to use it. We'll get to what I think of the idea of like the classic Tolkien sort of insulary isolationist elven culture and what that actually would become, and I'm very excited to do that. But I love that game companies, game creators, Wizards, obviously other companies have been doing it for years, other publishers that have had to create spaces for themselves because historically they couldn't find them in the professional spaces that dominated the market. Looking at you, Paizo, are now finally coming to the fact that we're doing that, and I think Sam mentions it in the last comment there. No more adjusting even from the term from race into heritage, because race is a very accurate term for what fantasy, like the typical Tolkien-esque inspired fantasy races are, in the way that they are different humanoidal type creature races with different evolutionary paths, but it's still a loaded term. It's coded very negatively in our own actual history. So heritage isn't, and therefore could just as easily be used.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of steps people can take to change these things. Another thing D&D is going to be doing is writing out some of the old dated descriptions that are basically like, here's a list of stereotypes. Like, it's lazy writing. And I think taking that additional step to frankly get rid of the lazy writing that is offensive and extremely dated is going to do a lot of changes. I'm loving a lot of the indie RPGs that are coming out right now that just focus on these more obscure themes. They don't have to fall on these like classic tropes. Like, yeah, it's fun to get your high fantasy on, man, but like personally, I'm loving stuff right now like kids on bikes. And anything I can get my hands on that just like it allows you to play something you're just not used to. Like if you ever really wanted to like dive into something like The Goonies or Stranger Things as one of those kids on bikes is a system I want to promote just out of the gate. There's just so much fun you can have, and I like that the indie scene is just pushing for more and more new and unique experiences. And
it also benefits the what we'll call the big role-playing publishers, your Wizards, your Paizos, and stuff like that, because like it just lets them know that there are markets there and that they could be integrating, not necessarily stealing, but letting those stories that are inspired by other stories inform potential campaigns. Like, Curse of Strahd, which is the most popular module on 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, is, it's based off historical stuff that's existed in D&D, but it's a vampire horror campaign. Like, that's what it is. It's just a bunch of horror tropes, like classic horror tropes, and that's not new for Wizards, but how they've introduced him and used him in the module is more clever, and it's more interesting, and it's more three-dimensional. And it's the same for Waterdeep Heist, which is a fun heist movie tropes thing slammed into Dungeons and Dragons, and that's another great module that's very popular. Unfortunately, Curse of Strahd was one of those, since it had so much Vistani, is a perfect example of, it's like, this is the most popular module and has a big, giant, problematic flag slammed in the center of its plot, like hard. And so it's why it was important for them to kind of start there as their big press item, I think. Yeah. And so you see those adapt. I'd have more Paizo conversations, but I only know anecdotal stories from the inner workings of Paizo, and I don't really want to reveal those or relay those.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've been super excited to see this year. So something just came out that I've been wanting to play really bad, which is the new Alien RPG. I don't know if you've heard of this. No, so it's an RPG based off of the Alien universe. You can buy it in 2 different methods. You can get like the starter box set, which is basically this canned story. You get enough of the rules to play the game. It's just one of those, those starter box sets.
It's a starter
But
game.
like most people who play this probably aren't going to run long-term campaigns. It's going to be a lot of one-shot fodder. Because I mean, frankly, Alien is a lot of fun because most of the characters die.
Yeah, that's what you want, is that threat of death.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the RPG and just seeing how robust the world is and how much they go into the world building of the corporations and the settling of space and how they reached out. It looks like it actually is something sustainable as long as your plot line isn't all xenomorphs all the time. There's a lot there. There's a lot of meat there that I think would be a lot of fun to play with. And I would almost say, like, if I were to run an Alien campaign, I probably wouldn't have xenomorphs in it, at least not for a long time.
Yeah, no, they're a big reveal, right? Like they're a late game or they're mid game to late game reward. You can have a lot of other stuff in it on the journey there. If you do run a campaign, I'm putting it in that I want to be a half xenomorph, half predator. So you're just gonna have to make room for that in your plot. It sounds awful. That's bad role playing.
That is the ultimate look at me, dad, look at me character.
Look how badass I am.
Like, oh my god. Yeah, let me tell you about my character. So like to start off, like he's an elf, but he's not actually an elf. He's a vampire, but he's like a vampire, half elf. It's really dope. And he's got a katana that's as long as he is. Like, yeah, that's right. It's like a 6-foot long katana. Nothing is more badass. I played Final Fantasy VII. I understand games.
I would love it if someone played like a half character where they only had the weaknesses of both and none of the strengths. I think that would be amazing. It would be problems to keep them alive. It'd be an escort mission of a campaign, but it would be hilarious, and I would. And like it.
Every shitty vampire weakness that like is super rare. Like you can't cross running water.
Yeah, like every weakness you could list.
Have to be invited in every time,
everywhere, all the time.
So do you have any tabletops that you're really looking forward to coming out a little bit later this year?
I do not, because I don't follow independent tabletop because I don't have time. I'm currently running 3 5th edition games and then playing in a 4th. So like I literally only have time to track wizards, and then that's it. I track that. Immunodeficient vampire, indeed, monkey bars. 100% immunodeficient vampire.
Yes.
It's like he's a vampire that's dying of consumption at all times, but can't quite die. Just a mess. But yeah, I can't follow tabletop. I'm running too many. And so it's not as simple as like, oh, you get like a 15-minute YouTube video or like a 20-minute like let's play of a game, and you kind of get an idea of it, like in video games. With tabletop, if I'm gonna follow it, I'm gonna like read what the rules are and like want to know what's happening, and I don't have time. So I can't even let myself get excited about anything, because it's like, essentially, here's what's gonna happen, Ron. Any independent tabletop I play will have to be run by a player in another game that I have, that I'm also playing, that I'm running, and then I get invited to play on. That's like 100% it. Until we're all rich and famous, and literally all we do is play tabletop.
Well, I'm going to throw 2 of my picks for later this year.
Yeah, inform the masses, including me.
In the indie circles, I am most excited about Sentinel Comics Rpg.
Yep.
Now, some of you might be familiar with this franchise if you've ever played Sentinels of the Multiverse, which is a super fun card-based heroes game. So it's superheroes, you fight a supervillain. The card game is fantastic. Me and my wife have, I think, like 6 of the box sets already. So this is something I'm a fan of. And they decided they were going to do their own full tabletop RPG around the in-game comic book series, which is the Sentinel Comics. So I am really stoked about that because I haven't had a good superhero game in a long time. Their tabletop RPGs have a couple of really good superhero games, but I haven't seen anything brand new that's really got me excited. And Sentinel Comics is one I'm looking forward to. And then more in the vein of like, I would definitely not call this an indie game. I'm really looking forward to Cyberpunk Red.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically a prequel to Cyberpunk 2077, which will be coming out, and we'll talk a bunch about that later because that's another thing I'm excited about. Shockingly, I like Cyberpunk games in general. But yeah, Cyberpunk Red, it looks like it's going to be great. I've been a fan of the series for quite some time. You know, the author is a good dude. I've actually had the total pleasure of getting to meet him through a friend of mine who's done some LARPing stuff around his things. And yeah, it's going to be a good game. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, let's let Cyberpunk bridge us from tabletop to video games. I think that's
oh man,
that's appropriate. I'd like to kick this one off mostly because I finished making my hookah bowl, so now I can talk a little bit.
Now you're not distracted.
No, I'm not distracted. It was clean that I knew nothing about upcoming independent. It was sort of independent.
You just rock those RPGs. Sick clouds, bro.
Yep, exactly. Analog style, no digital needed. But I want to talk about it because we're going to talk about a lot of stuff in gaming news. But if we're talking about the year of 2020, then we're talking about a console release year in the time of COVID. And we're talking about the only thing we can talk about since we only just recently got real details on one of the two consoles releasing this year, or one of the three, I guess, technically, but two big brands.
Standoff ended.
The standoff ended. Someone finally broke and named prices and like expectations and shit. And that would be, and so tomorrow Sony's doing a press conference, which they'll probably announce the price of the PS5 and everything, and so there'll be more information on that tomorrow. But for today, we got to talk about Xbox and the Xbox Series X and the Game Pass and the Series S and the backwards compatibility and the future compatibility. Like, they're making a lot of choices on this generation for Microsoft.
They're making a lot of claims, which all sound pretty tasty.
And as you know from previous console launches, all of those claims 100% come true every time.
Yeah, I mean, just like presidential campaign promises, 100% completion. Much like New Year's resolutions. You know, I'm doing really good on losing that 50 pounds and turning my life around. Yeah, my
hairline has actually come down 3 inches, which was my New Year's resolution. It used to be, as you can see, I'm growing more hair because that's about how realistic my resolutions ever are. But yeah, I want to talk about, and we'll kind of flow into this, but we'll start off with the Xbox announcement. Yeah. Carbon 21185 is Cyberpunk in 5th edition rule set. Ooh.
Interesting.
Ooh, maybe. Because I know 5th edition like the back of my hand, which most people don't actually know what the backs of their hands look like a lot because you don't spend a lot of time looking at your own hand backs. But I do know it fairly well. So I'll keep that clock, Peaches.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Carbon 2185.
2185. So what I'm excited about. So yeah, the Series X, there's tech specs, right? Like many teraflops, terabyte solid state drive, which is cool sounding, but should just be the expectation. Plenty of RAM to run it. Good like drive, it's 4K, proper 4K resolution, all that stuff. But I think what's funny about this is the techs of a console don't really matter, especially for the first couple years, because there's not been any kind of time to like maximize on it. Is more what Microsoft is doing around the console instead of with the consoles itself. The first thing that excited me about this, and you mentioned this, is that with the Game Pass, there's not a lot of reason if you have a gaming PC that's decent to even buy an Xbox, right? Like, there's nothing exclusive for it.
Yeah, that's kind of the bummer. They've got a lot of console exclusives, which I'm not jazzed about console exclusives in general. I think it's just one of those things that just, I don't know, it creates that have not. It's the FOMO economy. It's capitalism, and it's
normal modus operandi.
It's normal, and it's in business as usual, I suppose. But like, yeah, with Xbox's Game Pass, it's such a good service. I've subscribed to it in the beta, I guess. So basically, if you don't know what Game Pass is, you can access most of a pretty robust library of games for a small fee a month. I think like my fee's $8.99 or something like that a month, and it's a bunch of games. And one of the things they do is they take their exclusives and put them out at launch. So like you can gain access to a lot of games that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. I originally picked it up because they were going to put Outer Worlds on it.
Yep.
And it kept me around. Honestly, it kept me around. I'm super excited for a lot of exclusives that Xbox, actually more exclusives that Xbox has announced.
Yeah, it's definitely their flagship presentation with the subscription model, which, I mean, as a culture, we're all used to now. We all have Netflix, we all have Amazon Prime, or Hulu, or some sort of subscription, Disney Plus, where we don't own a physical thing. I'm a big fan of physical discs for loaning, and I buy almost all of my stuff physically if I can, but I don't disagree that that's because if I'm going to pay $60 for it either way, I might as well have something that I can give to someone else, right? Or but if I'm paying $8.99 a month or $10 a month to just have an access to a game's library, and I've got a kind of broad game concept, so like that ties so perfectly into it. So there's the Ultimate Pass, right? Which I believe Peach has mentioned they just added the EA library, so that's like 60 EA games that just got added into that for no extra cost, right? But more importantly, Game Pass for PCs looking good. You got your cross-platform Xbox to PC. Maybe you don't have a good gaming PC, so you got to use a console for that purpose. You're not getting hurt by it. If you have both, your saves can be clouded, so you can cross-play on that. But more importantly is the subscription service or the installment plans on the hardware of the Xboxes. And that, to me, is a almost brutally clutch move that's needed to happen that I just never thought they'd do, which is you get an Ultimate, say you already have the Ultimate Pass, which I think right now is, if you get the Ultimate Pass, it's like $15 a month. Sure. You get Xbox Live, you get the Game Pass, you get everything. You get the cross saves, and then for a monthly fee on top of that, no interest, no added cost, you just pay in installments for your Xbox like you would a cell phone and a service. And so now buying a new console isn't a $500 choice. It's a $20 extra a month or $35 a month choice. And with that console, you get games, you get live play, and you get your console, and you get all of that for $35 a month. You got a parent that can just buy a box for a kid and be like, here you go, and then that's it. You got a person that may not have a lot of money to adopt early, being able to adopt to that, and you're targeting a market even further that isn't the PC gaming market that usually has the money to rotate out at different times, different stuff, or is usually seen as a more like middle to premium market by comparison to, say, the console market, especially the console market that buys consoles 2 or 3 years after they come out. Well, now you don't have to wait. You can just get the new hotness now for much less of an upfront cost, and it comes with all the services, which then will eventually perfectly dovetail into Microsoft's games as a service streaming functionality as well, with their, I think it's called Project Scarlet. And so the like unified vision there of subscription gaming service, are already existing Xbox Live platforms, backwards compatibility so that we get a bunch of older games still relevant and still playable, and to increase the value of our subscription gaming service. Forwards compatibility, which means if you have an Xbox One, an Xbox One X, an Xbox Series X when it comes out, an Xbox Series S, all of the games that Microsoft is releasing, and most of the games that third parties will release for the Series X and the Series S, will also release on the Xbox One and One X for much longer than historically they've done. So they're moving their environment to a logical sort of like everybody plays together, doesn't matter what your price comes in at. And I think that is amazing. And as of today, per Pope Peaches, Game Pass Ultimate has streaming services that stream to Android phones and tablet for free. Project X Cloud, that's what it's called. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, they're killing it. I mean, it's amazing. And specs wise, if you don't have a gaming PC, specs wise, marginally better on the Xbox Series X from what we know right now.
Yeah, from as far as on paper, it is strong on paper.
But according to devs, though, there's been a lot of devs who've commented who've done versions for both systems and have really praised PS5 for the ease of being able to port the game into the console. So I think it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we can make a ton of predictions and I can go, yeah, it's going to be like this, but you never know. These console war, these generational wars, I think this one's going to be less of a war, because back in the day it was always just like you had to get the two systems. Like PC gaming was kind of its own separate thing, and then you had the consoles, and who's going to win the console war. I don't know that Xbox necessarily wants to sell the most consoles. I think Xbox just wants to find other ways to make money.
Xbox wants the most subscribers because that's a consistent income that's predictable and easy to market around, and it's also easier to make profit on. And the other thing is the Series S, to me, is being positioned, and again, this is all predictive based off what they're saying, as another excellent play to their market base. It has half the hard drive, same processor, same ray tracing functionality, no optical drive, so it's all digital downloads. So that hard drive isn't enough. People are going to have to add on an external onto that for games. But the key is this. Number one, it's cheaper by a lot. It's only $300. Number two, it can't do real 4K. It only upscales to 4K, does like 2.5K essentially. But here's the deal. If they're already thinking of future compatibility for the Xbox One and the Xbox One X, and you already have to do everything so that it renders in 1080p anyway, because too much of the market still has 1080p televisions that plays consoles, which many people do, right? Well, how do you reach that market? Well, they're not getting 4K TVs, so that means they're not dropping big dollars on their technology all the time. Release a cheaper console that strips out the things that aren't going to be used on a 1080p television anyway, and release that for so much cheaper that it's $200 less up front or $10 less a month if you subscribe to it, or however much less a month it is. I think it's $10 less a month. So you still can get that whole ecosystem. You just, instead of $35 a month, it's $25 a month. It's way cheaper, and it's that kind of thing where, so I don't, we're communists, right? We hate capitalism. But but what I do like is when capitalism works on the sort of logic that you make more money by making your thing accessible to more people, right? That's it. There's a premier brand FOMO, sort of like status buying of certain things, right? Like the highest grade video cards and everything like that. But we know that game developers need to get their games playable in as many households as possible. And so now the console maker, one of the two big console makers, has decided that they're also going to design their hardware around that, and their price points around that, and their subscription services around that too. It means that there's a unification of vision that's just better than anything we've ever seen before. So in a way, it's like, it's about making money. It's always about making those profits. But if making the profits makes things more accessible for people to get to, then that's a win-win. That's the ideology version of capitalism, where the market will meet the needs of the public where the public stands, not force the public into paying too much money for something. They will need that, and so I think Microsoft's done that in their models this year. Whether it all works out, we won't know until like a couple years from now, really, because the PS5 will come out. We don't know what Sony's going to do. We don't know if they're going to try and go, oh, well, our box is better and it's easier to port to, so we're going to charge more for it. We know they're not doing like a discount version. Their optical drive only is literally the only difference is it doesn't have a disc drive. Sony does have a game subscription service, and has for years, but they've never front pointed it.
And they haven't done enough with it, frankly. Yeah. I mean, games, these service-based games and streaming games are going to be a thing. I mean, it's coming down the pipeline. Unfortunately, we've had some really bad false starts with some of the more independent, like not independent. I mean, some of the more like, this is not console-based, this is not PC-based. Here's your controller, like Stadia. Stadia was an interesting idea that didn't get any support, and frankly kind of fell flat on its face. It didn't have the, like, hey, you want to play a bunch of games that have been out for 2 years on a streaming service? It's like, who is your fucking audience? Who was gonna buy this? Like I didn't understand it, but the concept of it was great. And I think if you could take something like that, make it a subscription service where you could Netflix games effectively with your little controller, that could be something really great. And Monkey Bar is pointing out that there is more stuff coming to Stadia.
But in December, it won't. Yeah. There's not enough boxes. There's not enough service for that. That service is going to die, like all streaming-only services. And the reason I think Microsoft is smart by not just going with Project X Cloud as its new thing, but still sticking with boxes and possible physical releases, is it means it can wait for the internet. Because I mean, games as a service streaming relies so much on things that are outside of the control of the thing that is providing it, right? Like, it relies on companies like Time Warner and Comcast. Like, that's a terrible partner to have to rely on. And it relies on them not gouging the hell out of those companies for the bandwidth that they're chewing up, trying to do games as a service on 4K, right? Like that's really the pain point. So I think by having games as a service for areas where it works, for areas with the right internet structure as an option, but still having Game Pass so you can still download stuff to your consoles and subscribe to it, or having digital buy for the people that want to buy, having optical and non-optical drive consoles, sort of is like, we're not going to miss anyone. And I think that's the problem with Stadia. Or what was the one that was before Stadia that was like the biggest push, that was like 6-7 years ago? It was so early to it. I want to say Nvidia tried to make it happen.
I missed the boat on that one.
Yeah. But yeah, Google. So what's this features? Computing to Google, who has way better servers than homebrew boxes. It could have been good. It's not. Also, Microsoft has the benefit now that it's no longer doing Mixer, which had the best immediacy and response time to streaming. It has all those servers it bought for Mixer that it can just move over to Project X Cloud, right? It has all that hardware farm, and so Microsoft already kind of set themselves up for it. It's Amazon.
Make back some of that ninja money.
The NVIDIA Shield was a great. I still have one, an NVIDIA Shield, but I'm thinking of something else for it. But yeah, Sony's gonna have kind of an uphill battle. This was a big announcement for Microsoft, and it really won a lot of like people over, because it felt like they're not just doing Game Pass as an option. That's where they're moving toward, and the value of Game Pass cannot be denied. Literally, one indie game a month is what you're paying for on Game Pass, and you have access to so much more. So
here's the thing. I'm gonna play a bunch of Xbox games. Yeah, I'm stoked for a bunch of Xbox games. The problem is, and I don't know if I don't think Microsoft sees this as a problem, because they there's no way they didn't see this coming. They sold me a PS5. I'm gonna buy a PS5.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've always had to do that though. I mean, Sony only just recently released or planned or announced, or it's out, Horizon Zero Dawn, right, for Steam. Right, Sony's always been real close, because it knows it's got great studios as its exclusive studios for its thing. So it knows its exclusives sell its consoles, right? And that's fine. That's why you would buy that. It's a feature of Sony. And so they know that even a top shelf PC gamer is going to be like, well, I guess I have to buy a PS4 or in the future a PS5. But now they have to respond to the fact that if someone doesn't care about third-person narrative action games, which is what Sony makes, why would they buy a PS5 instead? All.
I know for me it's diving into the back catalog. I saw that most of the PS4 games were going to be backwards compatible.
Yep.
I'm bummed that pretty much nothing before that is going to be compatible, and there's a lot of question on how that compatibility is going to turn out. And that's one of those things that, again, Xbox is crushing it, because they're like, yeah, you can play stuff off the original Xbox, like not everything, but we're gonna make some stuff playable.
I respect backwards compatibility, but I don't actually think it figures into real numbers. They did a study when the 360 and the PS3 were coming out, right? And they found that less than 5% of the market actually utilized backwards compatibility.
Interesting.
It's not actually a large seller of consoles. And if you think about it, deep retro cuts, certainly. And Nintendo has made it kind of part of its market blend, but we're not really talking about Nintendo because it's doing the Switch, it's doing well, it's doing its own thing, and it's killing its game. Like Nintendo's not competing with Sony or Microsoft. It's its own thing. Lots of people on Switch. We have 2 in my household. I might not play it for 6 months at a time. Doesn't matter. I don't regret the purchase. I love it.
Switch is one of those things where they won by not competing with anyone.
Yeah,
and we're gonna do something different. We're gonna basically do our handheld thing we've always dominated at, and now you can plug into the TV just as a standard thing.
Yeah, and there you go. It's good. It's clean. It's a great little system, and Nintendo absolutely finally landed where they wanted to in the space that the Wii U was a false start to. But the
Wii U.
Yeah, right. It was a good idea, and then it became a better idea.
I held on so hard with the Wii U. Shit, on principle, I played Breath of the Wild on the Wii U. It was the last game I bought it, because I bought the Wii U to play the new damn Zelda game. And even though my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, has a Switch and was totally up for, I got Breath of the Wild, you can play it. I'm like, nah.
I'm gonna get it on my Wii
U. That's what I bought it for. And
bad
I'll
money
be damned.
after bad, man. Nintendo's doing its own thing. This is really about what Sony and Microsoft do as competitors to each other, and as things that I don't know if it's nearly the wars of the Nintendo and Sega era, or even the Sony and Nintendo era, or even the Xbox 360, PS3 era and back, but it's still who gets more consoles in households, which means who gets more money from selling games. And the PS4 ran away with it this time. And now Microsoft has just pivoted their vision, and so is Sony just going to meet them every time and be like, okay, we'll just do this, we'll do the same thing as you, which would then bring it back to exactly what it's always should have been about, which is the games? Or is it going to be a situation where Sony is like, okay, but we're pivoting in this direction instead? And are we just going to have 3 different sort of like gaming experiences and ecosystems for 3 different kinds of video game players when it comes to which console you play? Like if you're a subscription service kind of broader gamer that isn't, that only occasionally like buys 1 or 2 brand new games when they come out kind of thing per annually, then does that make the Microsoft environment much more attractive to you than the Sony environment, which is more for someone that's like pulls like 10 to 20 games down a year at over discount prices or at over $20 and is still very much in the space of just gaming a lot. It's funny to me because I don't think that I would say that as Premiere, as long as they don't do the PS3 release $600 BS, says Mr. Jones. There's a lot of people that think that the PS5 is going to be $600. I think that would be a gross mistake. Premiere and premium consoles have never done well, not since the Neo Geo, not since before the Neo Geo, and they ain't going to do well now. Not in a time when we're
Neo Geo.
Yeah, right. It just doesn't. And so I think the PS5 is going to announce as $500. It'll be the exact same as the Series X. I think Sony's going to put more weight into PS Now. They won't have it ready for launch, like as far as the contracts and everything, but I think that's what they're going to do. And I think Sony's honestly just going to do the same thing as Microsoft. And if they're smart, they're going to partner with Steam yesterday, or Epic Games Store, one of the two. And they'll partner with them, and you'll be able to play your games on either.
So Tencent can officially own everything.
Yep.
Yay. Hey, so I wanted to ask you, what are you looking forward to games wise? What's coming out in the different spheres that is super exciting you? Let's go back and forth. You give me one and I'll give you one.
Well, I'll give you one that I know you're going to want to talk about because it's the one that we talk about. Because we're both so
softball it to me.
Softball it to you. But I mean, I'm going to steal it from you, but we're both going to talk about this game. So everyone should be excited about Cyberpunk 2077. I don't know who wouldn't be excited about that game. It's going to be the best. It's going to be the best RPG that's happened in a long time. It's going to be different. It's going to feel good. It's going to feel lived in. Unless CD Projekt Red pulls some like weird, excuse my language, fuck shit on this game. Yeah, that's it. But yeah, Cyberpunk 2077 is the game that I care about coming out this year, between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, and like, I mean, here's the deal. If you don't know about 2077, go watch one of the million people who've done in-depth breakdowns of every trailer and all the gameplay footage, and maybe got the 2 hours
or 4 hours of it.
Yeah, like go hang out with those people. I'm not going to sell you the game. You've probably already been sold this game. I mean, they didn't have me at Keanu. They already had me, but Keanu was definitely like, I was like, all right, well, I was pretty excited. I was going to wait a couple of weeks to get it. And then I was like, well, I'm going to wait like until the initial reviews come out to make sure it's not garbage and then try it. But everybody who's played it so far is like, I just didn't have enough time. I need bare minimum 200 hours. And I'm like,
I'm just gonna get it.
One of those.
I'm just gonna get it. It's gonna be like the new game that I stream on this channel all the time, because I'm just gonna be playing it all the time. I'm gonna be like, sorry, we're gonna take a break from the Cyberpunk stream to do 2 hours of noontime nostalgia, and then we will return to the Cyberpunk stream immediately after that, and that's just what I'm playing. That's just my entertainment factor. There'll be some long streaming days on that. Yeah, Cyberpunk is gonna be good. So that's like, it's literally, I tend to only focus on like 1 or 2 games at a time and try to ignore the rest, because I only have time for like one game at any given time. And so I'm excited for that. What are you, besides Cyberpunk, what are you excited for?
I got a bunch. I'll throw one out there because just like my opinions on my favorite Persona game might be a little controversial. I know a lot of people were really bummed out when they found out there was a Legend of Zelda announcement and it wasn't Breath of the Wild 2. I get it. I'm looking forward to that too. But a lot of people are saying like, hey, I heard there's going to be a new Legend of Zelda game, but it's not the one you wanted. Except for me, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is absolutely the game I wanted.
Yeah.
I love Hyrule Warriors. It is so much fun. I think I've bought it twice now at this point, just so I had it on my Switch so I could play it on my honeymoon. It's so much fun. It's that old school like Dynasty Warriors feel. You run around the big old battlefield to do stuff, except you're Legend of Zelda characters. And you could have just got away with Dynasty Warriors with a Legend of Zelda skin, but then they actually put a plot that, if you allow this game to become canon, makes the entirety of the disjointed Legend of Zelda series make sense.
It's so good. It's such a good, like, Hyrule Warriors. I'm a Dynasty Warriors fan. I like them. They're very zen. They're very, like, meditative murder games. Hyrule Warriors was a game that I was excited when it came out. And when they announced that they were going to do a war game with the characters from Breath of the Wild in the 100 years previous as a prequel to further flesh out Breath of the Wild, the Zelda lore in general, in a style. I've always been a fan of that. It's why I was a fan of Tales of Borderlands when Telltale released that. I love it when a popular franchise goes to another studio and is like, make something in our world that's really in our world. It's real. This isn't a Crypt of the Necrodancer, not that the Legend of Zelda plugin for that wasn't really fun, but this isn't just like a fun skin. It's real. It's part of the world, and really do that in a different genre or style of the game. I think it's great. I mean, it's something we're used to in the Mario games. Mario's been put into all kinds of games, and now seeing that in a Zelda game and having it being lore canon as well, ooh, it's gonna be so good. Yeah. I'm so excited for that.
I concur that Cadence of Hyrule was dope indeed, Monkey Bars. All right. What do you got next? What's your next? You got any more you got in the chamber besides Cyberpunk?
Yeah, I do. They mentioned it in the chat. It's a long ways off. There's a couple. Miles Morales Spider-Man.
Okay.
That
on my list too.
That one I'm very excited to, and then I'll do this one as well because it is a deep thing. This is going back to Sony and what they sell their games on. Horizon Zero Dawn was this amazing brand new IP, and it seems like every time Sony's like, we're gonna do a new IP, it always ends up being like inevitable franchise fodder. Not because the game sets itself up that way, but because every game from a Sony studio or a Sony exclusive ends up just being good enough for people to want to play more in that world. And that is what Horizon Zero Dawn or Horizon whatever it's called, like Go West, is gonna be. So that's gonna be great, and I think it's tied in well with the fact that it's coming out on Steam. So PC players are gonna play it, and then a year or so later, the new game will come out, and it'll sell them PS5s. It will absolutely move PS5s on the shelf, or off the shelf.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it was a deciding factor. I mean, frankly, there's...
Forbidden West. Nice.
Again, backwards compatibility is important to me, because I have been out of the console. I stepped out of the console scene for the PS4 and Xbox One.
Yeah.
I don't own either. The only thing I had was a Switch. And then I PC gamed. And so I play a lot of games, but it's all PC stuff. And so there's a lot of shared experiences between all the platforms. But yeah, I'm looking forward to dipping my toe back into the console pool and playing some of those games I missed. Because there's a bunch of them that were exclusive, like Last of Us 2 looks interesting. We'll see. I've tried to dodge most of the spoilers. I know a couple of the really, really big ones because, like, you know, it's like screaming into a movie theater, like some major spoiler.
Yeah.
I told you about the biggest dick move I've ever seen, which was also kind of a brilliant dick move. So I was playing Splatoon.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't want The Force Awakens spoiled for you, earmuffs for like the next 15 seconds.
Yeah.
So home dude goes in there, posts on his little squid guy that his little talk bubble that will pop up that you cannot avoid. You walk past him, and all it says is, it says that, shit, what's the main bad guy's name? Not the Jedi. I am blanking hard, and I'm a really big Star Wars fan. I'm gonna get
Vader?
Kylo Ren.
All
they said was, here's the big spoiler. So yeah, Kylo Ren kills his father, Han Solo.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I fucking walked past. And I'm like, had I not seen that opening night, because again, this is a day after it launched. I went and saw it, of course, opening night. And had I not seen it opening night, I'd be like, I don't know how I would find that 14-year-old that just tried to troll me, but I would find them. And I would give them a stern talking to, because I'm not that violent of a person.
Yeah, also, I agree with Monkey Bars, Peaches. You don't have to like Last of Us. It's perfectly fine not to like it. It's a well-made game, but a tone and exactly what you're doing and everything matters so much to Naughty Dog as a studio. So if it's not your flavor, you're not gonna like it because it's deeply integrated across the board. They're masterpiece makers in their games, but if it's not the style of painting that you like, if you're not a fan of impressionism, not that Last of Us is impressionism, but if you're not a fan of pointillism or romanticism, then you're just not going to be a fan, no matter how skilled the work is in front of you. And so it took me a bit to get into Last of Us because I wanted it to be Uncharted, and it is not Uncharted. But it is not Tomb Raider, but like at maximum effect.
But it's that, like, that's one of the things. One of my biggest gaming pet peeves is getting mad because somebody likes something or doesn't like something. I don't really give a shit what you enjoy. I think you should enjoy the things you enjoy, and if we have a mutual enjoyment of a thing, I'd love to talk to you about it. And I think that's a lot of fun. Like, yeah, there's a ton. I have a ton of my own nerd sins. I just don't get Metal Gear. I don't get those games. They seem fine.
How dare you?
They make a lot of people really, really happy, but like, people hold the creator of that game in such high esteem and obviously has made great games. Still don't enjoy playing them.
Yep, that's 100% fine. I've realized that I'd only played the bad Metal Gears, as one of my friends told me, that I just happened to only play 2 bad Metal Gears, and been like, why does anyone like these games? And then they're like, no, those are the throwaways. Those are the ones where it's like in between what he's passionate about for the next one. He releases one, and it's weird, and it's still flavored very Metal Gear, but it's not nearly as good as this game or this game. And so maybe one day I'll go back and play them, but probably not. I don't have the time.
You say you're gonna go back and do shit, but it's not gonna happen.
You never do. It's why I've been so slow on completing Dragon's Dogma, which I have on the Switch, because it's a very good game, but I don't have time to play it. Other game announcements. There's a lot of new coming out, but they're all getting pushed back. The only other 2 that I'm excited about that I know like nothing about, one because I haven't researched, the other because they haven't released anything about it. I'm excited for Bethesda's Redemption, right? Potential Starfield, of being like, this is a new IP, we get to do it from the ground up and like make it in the way that we want it, and maybe it'll be good or maybe it'll be trash. So I'm like tentatively excited. I'm hopeful for it. I want it to be good. I'd like a good Bethesda game back in my life. And then like a cleanly all-around good gaming experience from Bethesda. And then the other one is the one from what are they called? Obsidian. Now that with a Microsoft budget behind it, because Outer Worlds was so fun that I really want to see what they can do with a bunch of money, assuming Microsoft doesn't like get in their way on it.
Yeah, Outer Worlds was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I was happy because at the time I didn't want a 90-hour experience, so it never overstayed its welcome. But there definitely was a point where I was like, when I was playing it through the second time, I'm like, I'm playing it through a second time because I wanted this to be 90 hours. I hope
they hold on to that. I hope they really hold on to 90, like a shorter game, like a 50-hour game. I really think that that's their sweet spot for their game.
I'm gonna interrupt you really quick because somebody brought up Grounded. That game looks like it's going to be amazing. I played the what's available thus far on Xbox Game Pass for PC, and got through the content, the story content, in probably 25 to 30 minutes. I am the type of person that with those crafting games with a story, I really want to play it when it's done. I am a huge Subnautica fan. I think Subnautica is a brilliant game. It's one of the few survival crafting games that has a definitive beginning, middle, end. There's a story arc, there's a lot of depth, but then there's a lot of endless crafting you can do as well. I see Grounded as that, but the problem is the crafting, while very solid, is too rudimentary at this point, and I'm not one of those endless crafter people. Once I've hit, unless you have some really compelling end game content like Stardew Valley, usually the crafting game, once I beat the story, I move on. But Grounded is like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the game. And what is available right now is incredible. It's just, I don't want to go back until it's done. Just like I am desperate to play Subnautica Below Zero, I'm not going to do it until it's out of early access because I want that vision in the end. I like those stories, and frankly, I play too many video games and have too many hobbies outside of those to be able to go, well, I can commit to this game to replay it 9 times between early access and when it is actually completed.
Yeah, definitely. Subnautica basically sets the tone that anything that studio does is probably going to be good, and well implemented at this point.
So 2 games I wanted to bring up really quick that I'm really super looking forward to on Xbox or Game Pass, however you want to play these. First is State of Decay 3. I have been a hardcore State of Decay fan since its inception as a Xbox 360 downloadable game on the arcade. And it is what I want zombie survival sims to be. It's really fun. It had a lot of really great ideas. They improved upon some of those ideas in State of Decay 2, but again, it's not a perfect game. They're a smaller studio locally in Seattle, Undead Labs, and no, this is not an influencing factor, but I just think it's a cool anecdote. My wife is in State of Decay 3. Because at the time she was working on the floor below Undead Labs, and had a couple smoking buddies who worked for Undead, and they're like, hey, we're scanning faces for State of Decay 3. Do you want to be in the game? Mm-hmm. So there is a scan of my wife as a character somewhere in State of Decay 3 that I'm going to find, and I'm going to protect that character.
That just teaches you at home, make sure to always be smoking, because that's where you can socialize and possibly get yourself into a video game. Always be smoking. Dying of exposure, classic lesson.
Also, the other one, it's a bit more of a deep game and really impactful, is Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2. Senua's Sacrifice, Hellblade, was probably one of the deepest, most unnerving stories I had played in a long time. You were playing a character who suffers from pretty severe schizophrenia. And I love that right out of the gate, just in the credits, they're like, here are the doctors we consulted. Here are the mental health experts we consulted. Here's all the work we did to not present this as, wow, being insane is wacky. Look, I'm a Malkavian from Vampire the Masquerade.
Oh, God damn it.
It's so good, and I'm looking so forward to getting to see the continuation of that story, because frankly, just as an audio engineer as well, the sound design alone in that game was just sucked me in. Every moment of that game was a terrifying pleasure, and I look forward to getting back into that world.
Both of those games are gonna be like kind of knock out of the park games. State of Decay has such a loyal fandom. I like that we've been talking about this, and the chat's been all on this conversation for Watch Dogs 3, which it might be good. I never played the Watch Dogs games, but I'm sure if you liked 2, then I'm sure 3 will be good. But yeah, like video game wise, we've got some things. Hopefully they'll come out in a timely-ish fashion with all the COVID quarantine stuff.
We would need a whole episode to talk about Ubisoft, frankly.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about the Ubisoft controversies and stuff.
If you want my opinions on Ubisoft, go watch Jim Sterling's Jimquisition on Ubisoft, and just less yelling.
Yeah, we're not here to talk about Ubisoft or microtransactions or loot boxes or gambling. There's YouTubers that have dove into that. There's streamers and stuff that you can do. We're mostly just talking about the prescient kind of neutral news. Obviously Ubisoft's a terrible studio and they deserve to be shut down.
The shit they've been pulling is awful.
It's garbage.
Jim Sterling, I as a fellow big guy that loves talking about games, I absolutely love Jim Sterling. they are one of my favorite YouTubers. I've been following them since the Escapist days, and then seeing that success story of transitioning over to Patreon and being able to have a full-time employee, pay all their writers, and it's just one of those things that I could talk a lot about because I'm a fan. But I mean, that's what this podcast is about, talking about things we're fans of.
Yeah, right.
Speaking of fandoms, one last one to talk about before we go in games. We probably not going to have time to get super deep into board games, which is another thing I really love. But I wanted to really touch on, because we're running out of time, VR. My number one tip for this new generation of consoles, if you care about VR and want to play it on your console, get a PS4. Or PS5.
PS5, yeah. Just Sony's done the kind of slow growth right track on that, where they're just like, we have it, it's fun, it's an accessory. We realize it's still not price point right to be mass adopted, but it's better priced than almost anything else that had come out during the PS4 era for VR, and it's the accessible way to get it. And both of the consoles will be able to handle it well, but Sony's already got like the backlog of working in it to maximize it for console players. And so if you're not talking about the new Oculus stuff, if you're not talking about, the premium VR spaces like the Vive and stuff like that, you're talking about Sony. If Microsoft releases a VR thing, it won't be there yet in this next generation. It won't work as well as Sony's VR will.
Microsoft's VR offerings have not been great. I'm a big fan of the Oculus Quest. I think it's the level of accessibility that VR has needed. It's the reason I now play VR games. Play the shit out of Beat Saber on that. I'm really stoked that the Five Nights at Freddy's game got ported into it. That's just one to have fun watching your friends get scared. They seem more like micro experiences, like passing around the Rock Band guitar and whatnot. But in Oculus Quest, they just it leaked that the Oculus Quest 2 is coming. And I'm looking forward to it because it's actually going to have 4K resolution. I think one of my biggest complaints about the Quest is that in order for it to be so if you don't know, the Quest is a completely standalone VR unit. You don't plug it into anything. You just power it up, hook it to the internet, put it on your head, you're playing VR games, which is one of the things that's been sorely lacking in the VR space, is that people are constantly having to have wiring rigs and whatnot, and sometimes the wireless ones don't work really great. I love that the Quest has allowed me to really dabble into VR and now get very excited when new VR experiences come out. And like I said, man, I'm stoked to see what they have on board for Quest 2. One thing you said, Pope Peach said, thanks for taking the time to speak out. I wanted to say really quick, this isn't an apolitical podcast, because silence is a political opinion. I'm very opinionated when it comes to a lot of stuff. I'm a really nervous guy. I like to talk about things that make me happy for the most part, but I ain't ever gonna shy away from saying trans women are women, Black Lives Matter, I condemn white supremacy. There's a lot of shit I'm not down with in 2020 world.
We're Ron and I are very left is just that's just the thing. So what you would assume comes with that in the internet concept of leftist is
there's just a lot of accurate podcasts that steer so hard into no, we will never talk about politics ever, and I ain't gonna sit here and talk and give a big diatribe about the presidency and the world, but I'm also not gonna shy away from mentioning Ubisoft does some really shitty, abusive stuff and has an old boys club. They got away with a lot of things. There's a lot of game makers that are even beloved that work their people half to death. And that's shitty, and we should probably do something.
What's up, Rockstar? There's a great
What's up, CD Projekt Red? As much as that breaks my heart.
It's the problem is that so often, if we're just talking about labor, that stuff ends up resulting because of the culture of the environments in these amazing games. And so it's real hard because it's not It's not a, I don't think it's a requirement to make good games. The studio that does Apex and the Titanfall games doesn't do this. Other studios haven't done this in the past and have made great games, not being monsters, capitalist monsters, if we're just talking about labor stuff. But, you get all these horror stories from CD Projekt Red or Rockstar, and then they'll release a game and the game is amazing. And so, to be clear, in my perfect world, Ubisoft would get shut down and THQ Nordic would just buy the rights to a bunch of their properties, because I just love THQ Nordic's story, even if their stuff isn't always perfect. And
game workers would unionize
and stuff and all that. But yeah, we're very left. It's not what we tend to focus on. But if you ever want opinions like that, follow any of the Dying Exposure or my personal stuff at Stephen Perry. Just post on social media and tag one of us, and I'm sure we'll get into an opinion about it. It's not really what we didn't release this as Ron and Steve talk about the pressing social cultural issues. I especially feel bad because it's how many more leftist white cis het dudes do you need telling you things about other categories of people, man? The left tube is filled with them. So if you want to go down that thing, and so it's better to casually move through it. Well, before we get wrapped up, because I still have some prep work for the stream that's going to happen in about an hour, for Through the Mill. We didn't get to board games, and again, board games, there's cool things happening there, and there's a lot of cool digitalization and everything because of COVID. But we'll do that as a topic for another podcast. I do want to do some pluggy stuff. So the Roles We Play is a 1st and 15th of the month podcast that happens on the Roles We Play.podbean.com. And then in theory, if I'm doing my job, it gets uploaded roughly on the 1st and the 15th, maybe the 2nd and the 16th kind of thing.
It's all good.
Depending on when we get the episode done, right? And we talk about all forms of essentially gaming. It's a gaming as a complete thing. Board games, tabletop, LARPing, video games thing, because it's what we do for entertainment. And it's good. It's usually only 30 to 40 minutes instead of an hour and what are we up to? An hour and 30.
To be frank, if you're here, you're getting to see the whole episode for everybody. I will probably break this into a two-parter for the sake of our listening audience who expects 30 to 40 minute episodes.
It won't be that way on Dying of Exposure. I've just recorded this OBS session, and I'm just going to upload it with zero editing.
It's the first time Dying of Exposure will have something up that Roles We Play doesn't have up first. So
yeah, there you go.
You guys get it. We'll throw that your way, because I am a firm supporter of Dying of Exposure and all the stuff that Steve is doing. That's very exciting, with a lot of amazing nerdy creatives. There's a lot of great games that are going on at Dying of Exposure. There's a lot of really cool talks about things, from snacks to nerdcore music. I'm just going to plug your thing, because I am a fan of Dying of Exposure, which it made me very excited to be able to come into the family.
Well, you're plugging the thing. You know what's a really interesting thing about Dying of Exposure is
what's that?
Is there's going to be another a podcast, the first proper podcast. We do have the series Pilot Treason that I do with Brandon, who plays Barry in Through the Mill, but that we did a while ago, and we're going to get back to post-COVID uploading episodes about that. But there's another podcast that Dying of Exposure is going to do coming up here this November. I haven't picked exactly the date that it's going to release. That's an actual play D&D podcast, Ron, that you might be interested in because you're in it.
What?
Yeah. That game. You know, when I had you set up all that stuff and you were like, why? And I'm like, I'll tell you later. So that's going to be coming up. And so if you want more Ron and Steve, and then also Triple A Ron, Aaron Blaylock, and my partner Kelsey in your life, we're going to have a D&D podcast coming out here relatively shortly. Right now I'm working on editing the first episode, and it is, if I might say, and I don't often toot the horn of anything I'm involved in, very good.
I'm really stoked for it. It's been a lot of fun to play. I don't get to be a tabletop player very often. I run a lot of games, and I'm also doubly excited that you've allowed me to explore with my character a bit into my Polynesian roots and having a lot of that influence in there. My grandfather was born in American Samoa, so getting to play a character in a setting that traditionally doesn't really have any island influence, I'm stoked. I'm stoked to play a Failing who is influenced by my culture and getting to share that with people in a cool, fun way. And on just in general, it's going to be a lot of fun. And the concept for this podcast, I listen to D&D podcasts, and I can sincerely say I have not heard of anything quite like this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna
when it comes to playing D&D.
I'm not gonna give up too much of what the conceits and the point of view of this one is, but Ron's wife did the character art. It's very much an in the family thing. It's not, it's basically because I started listening to so much D&D podcasts, it was almost an inevitability that I would do it. It's what inspired Through the Mill, which is very much just sort of like a real look at a D&D campaign. It's not edited, right? We Twitch stream it. But and then this one is more structured like it's going to be an entertainment podcast than there. So there's going to be some differences, but it is in D&D. It is a homebrew world, and everything. Oh, thank you, Peaches.
Thank you. That's cool to see people are excited for that, and I do love Triple A Ron as well. He is super fun to play with. I've gotten to hang out with Aaron a number of times, and this is just, it's a great group. Kelsey is super fun to play with as well. It feels like coming home to that feeling of like just gaming with your friends, but getting to do something also entertaining and having experienced gamers doing it. So I don't know. I hope you all enjoy it. I know I'm really stoked about it. And if it just turns into something I get to have these MP3s for the rest of my life, then hey, that's rad. If it does something more, that would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But if it does something more, we got to send like a dozen roses to Brandon Lee Mulligan.
Yeah, I know, right? He's the inspiration point. It's weird. We came in on a different M than most people. Most people came in on Mercer. We came in on Mulligan. Oh, thank you for the follow, Monkey Bars, and thank you again, Peaches, for the bits. I won't do the rapping on this one. Maybe I'll do it at the end of Through the Mill or the next Noontime Nostalgia I'm in. Next time I see you in something, I'll try to make it because we got to wrap this up. But so we already plugged the things. We already kind of excited people about that. Podcast will come out in November, start coming out in November. We're going to have some back episodes, so we got a little room in case, sicknesses or things get worse, which apparently they always can get worse in 2020. It's sounding pretty good. I got to play out with some content editing. I've got some tips from Bill Beats for mixing the 4 vocals real cleanly so that it'll sound more professional than I normally make things sound. It's just kind of a family affair of trying to make this product. And there will be the normal podcast stuff for it too. So there will be like Patreons and things like that, and I'll announce that as we get closer to the release date of what that is and where you can support these wonderful people who I will be splitting the Patreon money with. It will not all go into some business fund for Dying of Exposure. It will go to the players and then respectively me, but at an equal amount, as opposed to me being like, well, I do this, so it's my thing. So follow us there. 1st and the 15th for the roles we play. Mondays, starting hopefully next week, Mondays and Fridays for new videos on Dying of Exposure that are like edited content. Still Noontime Nostalgias, Mondays and Thursdays at noon Pacific, Through the Mill 7:30 Pacific here every Tuesday night. Written articles on Dying of Exposure every Wednesday on the website dyingofexposure.com. So, and then more stuff from Ron. There will be more things from Ron coming out in various forms. Some on Dying of Exposure, some through whatever Ron wants to release it as. Very exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot more with my recent move to doing a lot more audio and creative stuff full time. I'm going to be releasing some fun voice acting projects. And right now, if you want to support what I think is a really great dark fantasy series my friend Will Carson wrote, he has a Patreon up right now, and I am providing the voice for the audiobook for that, Waking of the Gods. So if you want to check that out, go check out his Patreon page. You can do the Google. I trust you, if you're a nerd and listening to this, to find it on the Google. I don't need to give you a URL. And of course, follow us on The Roles We Play. That's therolesweplay.podbean.com, at Facebook. And also, if you want to follow just my stuff, I repost up a lot of the roles we play. Leota Role-Playing on Facebook. That's how you can find me.
Thank you, Rom, for joining me in this live podcast experiment. And I will
we'll do it again
audio
sometime.
file ASAP.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.